Happy end to 2022. This is the next to the last show that we've got for you for the SMC Journal podcast, the show that's all about performance engineering and site reliability engineering in modern IT today. I'm Scott Moore, your host. Thank you for joining me today. We have talked in the past, not only on this show, but the performance tour, about service level objectives. Now, when you get into a DevOps culture and site reliability engineering and you start reading those Google books, you're going to see service level objectives. And when Google came up with those, they actually created their own tools around that. Well, people wanted to adopt that same philosophy of service level objectives, the service level indicators, and mapping those to possible service level agreements. So again, we've talked about that in the past in the show, but one thing we haven't talked about is for those companies who have in the past used APM tools to come up with metrics to find out how well applications are doing or to know when they should do something about a poor performing application, for example, that's not the same as a metric that you would come up with for service level objectives. And some people are finding it difficult to make the transition between an APM platform and an observability platform in creating some kind of calculation that tells me how well I'm actually doing right now in terms of apps or end users or business, whatever. But we know that it's a great thing to do, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do for some people. So what I wanted to do was bring on a company that's all they talk about and all they focus on, service level objectives. And that's what we're going to talk to Nobl9 today. So before we get into that interview, let's talk about the sponsors that make the SMC Journal possible. This episode is sponsored by Micro Focus and the LoadRunner Solutions family. That includes LoadRunner Professional, Enterprise, Cloud, and Developer. You know, performance matters. Did you know that LoadRunner Solutions have the largest community of practitioners in the world? Join that community at community.microfocus.com, scan the QR code, and check out the LoadRunner family page on performance engineering, as well as their YouTube playlist that we've got links for in the show notes on smcjournal.com as well as YouTube. This episode is sponsored by Supervisor. Stop losing money with a slow website. With Supervisor, you can continuously track the performance of your code and your hosting. Predict site page load speed with high user volumes and an easy one-click load test solution. Find out more at supervisor.com. This episode is sponsored by Haymaker Coffee Company. Did you know that we have our own blend of coffee? That's right, it's the Scott Moore 503 blend. The Performance Tour Edition is a 6-ounce bag of espresso roast that's made specifically for me. Go to haymakercoffeeco.com and use our code PERF10 to get 10% off your purchase. Every purchase that you make supports the SMC Journal as well as the other things that I do for the performance community. So go and check them out and get some today. I'm sure you'll love this coffee as much as I do. Okay, so maybe you are at a point where you're implementing an observability platform right now. You're also implementing service level objectives to try to create this wonderful dashboard that management is going to eventually look at and understand how well is my business doing in terms of how the technology that we're using, the code we're deploying, how well is it performing, how resilient and how reliable is my application. And when we have migrated to the cloud, what should we be looking at to determine that reliability as well? So today we're going to interview Alex Hidalgo of Nobl9 and want to get into the subject of service level objectives and how to create them, what they are made of, and how do I translate between what I'm used to seeing with APM versus an observability platform. Let's talk to Alex now. Hey Alex, welcome to the SMC Journal podcast.
Thanks so much, Scott. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. You know, I've been tracking Nobl9 for a little while now, mainly because I've been talking more and more about SLOs to people who are in the performance engineering world, and they're starting to make a transition into the site reliability engineering world. We're also hearing more about observability versus standard APM products, and with that comes service level objectives. It seems like that's really what Nobl9 does, but I'd like for you to talk about yourself, what led you to Nobl9 and what Nobl9 does for our audience who might not be familiar with you.
Sure. So I got my start in tech a little bit late. I spent most of my 20s studying philosophy and history and working at restaurants and retail establishments and things like that. And I bring that up because eventually, once I did get into the tech world, I very quickly kind of saw the parallels between what we call services in tech, right? It's a thing that provides a service for someone. And I'm like, well, I've been doing that my whole life. It's just I was literally called a server uh, and I was
Yeah.
bringing you your food, right? And so, I eventually, via a whirlwind of circumstances, ended up as an SRE at Google. And there, of course, a big part of that whole process is service level objectives, or SLOs. And I immediately got fascinated by the whole concept because I realized it really was kind of what I'd already been doing my entire career, which was try to be the right amount of correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew when I was a line chef, or like a line cook, I should say, that not every dish we sent out would be perfect. Every once in a while, a customer would complain and send it back, right? Maybe we didn't get the temperature on their steak right, or they were upset about something else. And actually, the whole kitchen was fine with that. We just aimed to only have a certain amount of dishes be sent back because we knew at some point that would happen. And that was just an internalized version of what SLOs are, right? SLOs are just basically accepting that a certain amount of failure will happen. So just aim to only absorb the right amount of failure as opposed to trying to be perfect.
That's probably one of the best explanations I've heard from anybody since I started talking about that. So I've got the right person on this conversation today. I've been around for a long time in IT, and I've been used to learning APM platforms, learning how to monitor infrastructure, marry that with end user transaction timings to see what the end user is experiencing. But now we're starting to hear more about observability, which is answering the question, how is my business doing? How are my applications doing? And how do I know real time where I stand and what the users are experiencing? That it's a different to come up with metrics from a APM product that it's got a bunch of graphs and charts, and yeah, there's that mysterious single pane of glass that just really turns into a single pane. But then you've got service level objectives, which is a different thing. And a lot of times the conversations I'm having currently are people who are saying, how do I translate what I used to set as a metric to know what to do, know when things are good or bad, versus a service level objective to know how well I'm doing? Why is that such a difficult thing for people to translate?
So I think it's particularly difficult for people who've spent most of their careers, like it sounds like you and I have, dealing more on backend or infrastructure, platform kind of things, because we used to care about things like CPU utilization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your CPU being pegged at 100% for hours, if not days, if not even weeks, that probably means something isn't quite right. But it doesn't mean that anything is actually going wrong for your users.
Good
And
idea.
so the kind of more modern approach to this and what SLOs help you do is they help you track actual user journeys, right? That's what observability gives you. It's not metrics off of your platform. It is what is actually happening. What's actually going on in terms of multi-component services, multi-component journeys. And this gives you this powerful new way of thinking about the fact that, okay, maybe we need to investigate that 100% CPU utilization, but maybe we can do that as a ticket later. Because if we have these other measurements that are telling us everything is still operating correct for our user, then we don't have to page. We don't have to wake someone up at 3 a.m. just to figure out why there's a runaway thread somewhere if that runaway thread is not actually impacting business operations. So it gives you a better way of capturing what's actually happening in your systems from the user perspective. And at the end of the day, that's what actually matters, right? We want a well-functioning, performant business product. We don't actually necessarily care, is our CPU pegged to 100%?
Yeah, I guess the way I would think of it is I would be asking the question now, is 100% CPU utilization really costing me users to abandon my site, or am I losing money because of it? And if I'm not, that's a weighed risk. There may, like you said, be something wrong, but it's all about I mean, follow the money. If you're losing money or you're losing users off your platform, that's the key metric. So I really love the idea of using these SLOs as what you're trying to achieve uh, in this way, just because it has business context to it, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the big thing. So if you were somebody who has been assigned for the very first time, you've got to define some SLOs for our business now. What's the right way to go about that? Like, where do you even start?
So an SLO based approach, which is really how I try to talk about it, right? Because we say you're doing SLOs, but really there's three different components to doing SLOs, right? Or an SLO based approach. I've taken to calling it the reliability stack, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's three separate numbers you use to help you think about how reliable you've been over time. And at the bottom of the stack are SLIs, service level indicators, and they're really in some ways the most important part of the entire process, because what a good service level indicator is a measurement of the user experience. Now, quick tangent, I'm going to say user quite a bit. What I mean with a user is it could be a paying customer, it could be human, it could just be another service that depends on yours, right?
Mm,
So again, like if you're like an infrastructure engineer, your users are the developers writing the code that runs on your platform, for example,
that's right.
right? So when I say user, it doesn't necessarily have to be a human. Even it definitely doesn't have to be a customer. It could be the team down the hall from you, like whatever it might be. But the point is, a good SLI measures your user's experience, right? Again, whatever that might be. And eventually, you do need to be able to split this SLI into, is this a good value or a bad value, right? Either the user's having a good experience or they're not having a good experience. So this could be anything as complex as, we consider it good if our user is able to log in and add something to their shopping cart and check out, to, when they click the purchase button, that depresses within 50 milliseconds so the UI doesn't look like too slow. Or it could be something like, my platform, if you're responsible for a Kubernetes deploy, right? That pod startup time is 10 seconds or less, and once you're able to figure out what good means and what bad means, you can very quickly turn that into a percentage, right? A percentage is just some amount over a total amount, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once you have a good SLI measurement, then you can also have the total SLI measurement, right? Like, how many times did this thing happen total versus how many times was it good? And now you have a percentage. And that percentage informs the next thing on the stack, which is an SLO. Or here, I like to say SLO target, because again, the term SLO is so overloaded because it kind of means everything we're talking about here. And so your SLO target is the target percentage. So if you have an SLI that's able to inform a percentage, your SLO target is what you want that to be. And then finally, at the top of your stack, we have error budgets, which is really just a way to think about SLO performance over time. So we have a good measurement now. We have a target for how often we want things to be good, right? Often with many nines in it, right? 99.9% or like something along those lines. And then your error budget introduces like the last number kind of involved, which is like the window. Over what period of time do you care about things? Very often this is set to 28 days or 30 days. A lot of this is because historically SLO has been tied closely to SLAs, which are frequently tied to calendar months. But I've also seen lots of people use them very usefully over 14-day windows, for example. Maybe you want it to align with your sprint, so you can use this to make better decisions, to figure out what are we going to do in our next sprint. Or, I've even seen people use 7-day windows well, and like things like that. But like you set this window, and your error budget tells you how you've performed over that period. And the reason it's called an error budget is because, let's say we have an SLO target of 99%. What we're saying with that is we want things to be good. We want things to be acceptable for our user 99% of the time. And what you're implying there is that you're okay with 1% of failure.
Mm-hmm.
So that 1% is your error budget. And, we talk about error budget burn, right? How are you burning through your budget? How many failures are you detecting? And how close are you getting to exceeding that 1% or whatever your budget looks like over your time window, right? So just to sum it all up, right, a full set of the stack might be something like, we want user requests to this API endpoint to complete successfully without error within 250 milliseconds, 99% of the time, over a 28-day window. Right? That would be the whole kind of English version of all those different parts of the stack.
Okay. That makes it very easy for me to understand. I would think anybody would understand that. When we talk about this error budget and the amount of time in this month that you want things to be up, when you're in the cloud, we no longer hear terms like performance when we shift to the cloud. We hear more about resilience and reliability. And I've heard, and just talking to Stephen Townshend just the other day, that performance is sort of inside of the reliability ecosystem. Can you confirm that to me? Like when we talk about reliability, it's assumed that performance and efficiency and these things that we've been testing for as a performance engineer for years, it's part of that. And that's part of an SLO, right?
Yes. So a good SLO is measuring your reliability, right? And unfortunately, there's a problem where people conflate reliability and availability. And that's not really what reliability means at all. Now, of course, you have to be available to be reliable, especially when we're talking about web services, for example. But reliability really kind of means, are you doing what your users need you to do? Which includes, are you performing well enough, right? Are we responding quick enough? Are we responding with the right data? Are we able to, is the service able to handle an influx of data, right? So to be reliable, you need to be able to do what your users expect from you and what you were designed to do. And that requires proper performance. It requires robustness. It requires proper resilience. These are all, I don't want to say necessarily subcomponents of reliability, because that's not entirely true, right? But you need those things to be true. You need to be performant. You need to be robust. You need to be resilient. Otherwise, you'll never be able to be actually reliable.
So if I'm a listener to this podcast today and you've got me convinced, I now got an observability platform, SLOs are the way to go. How does Nobl9 help me with that?
So Nobl9 was built because everyone wanted to do SLOs, right? After Google published both the first and the second SRE books, everyone's like, oh, this makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Like they read explanations similar to the ones I just gave and they're like, cool, like we want to do this. The problem is people didn't have Google's tooling. And so everyone ended up having to build their own platform. I did that when I was at Squarespace. I helped build an internal SLO calculation platform because we were using Prometheus, and Prometheus doesn't do it by default,
Wow.
And so we saw this problem where people were having to build the solution over and over and over and over again. And that makes for a pretty good business idea. If tons of people are having to solve the problem over and over again, how about we solve it for them? So what Nobl9 brings to the table is not just us being able to, take in your telemetry and do SLO calculations against it, but, we aim to talk to everything, right? We currently support 24 different data integrations. So it doesn't matter if your metrics live in Datadog or Prometheus or New Relic or Lightstep or Sumo Logic or Splunk or Elasticsearch, or right, we can talk to BigQuery to get your data out. We don't presume to know where the data that might inform a good SLI and therefore a good SLO might live. So, like the first thing we give you is just the ability to grab data from just about anywhere. Send results to just about anywhere, whether or not it's a data export or, we can send notifications or alerts, if you want to call them that, to PagerDuty and Opsgenie and Microsoft Teams and Slack and Discord and Jira and ServiceNow. And right, again, like similar to being able to ingest data, we want to be able to notify you of your SLO status at any endpoint. Well, also is giving you way more advanced SLO calculation options. I can describe SLOs very simply, but we can also talk about, a whole ton of different ways that you might want to do that. And that's a thing that we give you that other platforms currently don't. Right? They don't give you the flexibility to really think about how you want to take this data and how you want to perform math against it before you simply compare it to some kind of percentage, And then finally, just, we give you things like we just launched Replay. Replay lets you ingest 30 days of data and retroactively apply SLO math against it. So gone are the days of setting an SLO and being like, well, I better come back in 30 days and see what it looks like. Do I have to
Right.
adjust it? And so much other stuff like on the horizon, right? Like you're getting an entire company focused on this. The kind of advanced stuff that we have in the pipeline for next year, 2023, is just like it's blowing my mind just thinking about it. And my career has been focused only on SLOs for about 6 years now. So
Wow. So one of the things I know is that you also host a conference all around SLOs called the SLOCONF. And I will have links on the show notes in the YouTube video as well as smcjournal.com. But SLOCONF, last one I think was in May of 2022. So when is the next one? I know it's a virtual conference. Will it be virtual? Will you have an on-prem conference coming up? And what type of information can people expect from a conference like this?
yeah, so SlowConf is really interesting. We ran it twice, May 2021 and May 2022. Um, it's coming up May 2023. We've started talks. I don't quite want to say the dates because we're like 99% sure, but I'd rather not record something and then have that change. But it'll be mid-May again,
Okay.
as it has been the last few years. And what makes SLOConf really interesting is that it was launched in a pandemic world, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
everyone was still work from home. In person was just not a thing anyone was really even thinking about at the time. And so what we did was we developed this format where all the talks were 5 to 10 minutes long. So there were these tiny little snippets of wisdom, right? There were these tiny little things that you can watch while you worked, right? Because it wasn't going to a conference. You weren't jumping on an airplane and staying in a hotel and attending the conference. We're like, let's make the content easy to digest. By instead of having these long, lengthy discussions, let's have people share their little bits of experience or the neat little math tricks they've learned for better informing an SLI or better analyzing an error budget status. And yeah, like a big part of the format is just the fact that these are very easy to digest things that you don't necessarily have to set off time, right? Because no one wants to actually take off of work to attend, quote unquote, a virtual conference, right? Like that just feels weird. Like I'm going to take 3 days off and just sit in front of my computer and watch people talk at me. And this turned out to be very popular, a little different. I don't really know if anyone else is doing that same kind of thing. We repeated the format for 2022. Very similar. You can find all this on YouTube, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Just search for SLOConf, and like people will find every talk from 2021, every talk from 2022, and we'll be repeating most of that same format for 2023. We're still figuring things out. Again, if this changes in the next few weeks, please don't do too much. But this year, we'd like to add a few more live elements to it. We're likely going to have a few kind of keynote kind of talks that'll be streamed live as opposed to necessarily being pre-recorded. We're also looking to hopefully get some viewing parties set up. Right, so places where the live stream, which will be moderated this year, right? So we're not just going to have everything be pre-recorded like the past. We're going to be presenting talks at certain points in
Right.
time via moderation, via a live stream. So hopefully we'll get more engagement as more people are watching the same talks at the same time instead of cherry picking exactly the ones like they wanted to see. And so hand in hand with that, we're hoping to have some live viewing locations where people who do feel comfortable can gather and watch the live stream together. Lots of details still to be worked out, but I will say active planning has started. It is going to be my primary focus for the next few months, as well as several other people on Nobl9. And you can expect to hear a lot about this very soon. In fact, by the time this episode goes up, everything might be announced already.
Oh,
So
well, that's great.
uh,
No, I've
yeah,
watched several of the videos myself on YouTube after I heard about the conference. They're very good. And, the live aspect, maybe to get some interactivity, would be really nice. And I know it was really cool to be able to still go to events virtually when everybody was in lockdown. But after 2+ years of it, it's kind of like, well, I kind of want to get out of the house and have an excuse. So I don't know how other people feel about it, but it's like I got to get out now. So I'm hoping to see more events where there's some in-person stuff, like KubeCon was that way this year, and it was really good to get out and actually meet some people that you'd only talk to virtually for a couple of years. So
Yeah, but we definitely
This,
want to keep it like as a hybrid. We definitely feel strongly about the streaming format because it's so much more accessible, right? Both for those who do not yet feel comfortable, those who have medical reasons to literally not yet, like be able to go out,
mhm.
as well as like a KubeCon is incredibly expensive to get to, whereas anyone with an internet connection can watch a free conference like SLOCONF no matter where they are in the world, and I think that's really great too, right?
That's
Just
true.
making this content very accessible, very widely able to be watched. So no matter what we do with SLOCONF in the future, even if we adopt even more than the live viewing party kind of in-person thing, we're always going to ensure that it's going to be accessible to anyone on the planet.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's wonderful. So this has really been good. I mean, I've learned something with just this little conversation, and I know we've sort of got a time limit here, but love to have you back on the show when you can announce some of the things that are coming out with Nobl9, where you're taking the product, and you'd like to talk about it more. More than happy to have you back on the show, and we can discuss it, and we'll put it out there for everybody to see. But that was that wonderful explanation of SLOs and how to set them up and how they're made up, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much. I had a great time, and yeah, I'd love to come back soon.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. We'll talk to you next time. Great interview. It was great to have Alex on. And I really want to find out what all those great new things are that they're going to be implementing in the Nobl9 technology in the near future. And I do plan on checking out the SLOCONF when it comes out. That conference does have some really good videos on YouTube. You should check them out. And we do have the links on this program notes. So what do you think? Got some input for me on service level objectives? Contact me. You can reach me through my website, scottmoore.consulting, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can also email me at help@scottmoore.consulting directly through email. And if you like this type of programming, make sure you subscribe and like my channel, share the information with others on social media, help my audience grow to let me know you like this and that I'm on the right track. Would love to hear your feedback about service level objectives or anything else you'd like to see. Now that we're at the end of 2022, where do we go from here in 2023? What more would you like to see? I do want to expand topics beyond just performance engineering into the site reliability, engineering, resiliency, reliability, chaos, AI ops, any of observability, any of that. I love to keep talking about it because performance plays a big role in all of that. But I'd like to hear from you as well. So contact me when you can. For this episode of the SMC Journal podcast, this is Scott Moore saying thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.